Hey everybody, welcome to the In All Things podcast. It's time to see God in everything. All right, everybody, welcome to the In All Things podcast. It's Wednesday, so we're here with a brand new episode. My name is Mitch Frost, and I'm here with Pastor Steve Markle.
Yeah, it's good to be here today.
Yeah, we're excited. So I'm tired. I know we've been starting a lot of episodes that way, but lock-ins are rough.
Right.
When's the last time you did a youth lock-in?
Wow, that's probably been 20 years. Mm-hmm. And we talked about that before. I think even the last episode we talked about it because it was leading into it. And I think it was you told me that you read on a blog or something that youth pastors say it adds like 10 years to your life or takes you 10 years off your life, whatever way you want it. It makes you feel old. So, and you just don't feel good for the next couple of days.
No, your body's just wrecked and it just like kind of feels sick the next couple of days. And it's not the greatest.
No. I was talking about it last night with Devi and Nick, and who both were there all night. And I said, it's like, even if you're at one of those youth events like camp where you stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning, even if you get 4 hours of sleep, you still feel like a normal person somewhat. But this is just it wrecks you. So you're going to do one next year, right?
We'll see. That's definitely not planned or set in stone.
Yeah, no promises, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was good. Everything was good. We were up for 12 hours straight here at the church, and then we had to clean afterwards, which is like, how are we even awake at this point?
Right.
And then we went home, passed out, But Sunday came. We were supposed to have youth group, and throughout the day, I kept hearing from different leaders that they wouldn't be there because they were tired or because they weren't feeling great. And then I was like, oh, that's fine. Like, if you're at the lock-in, take the night off, no big deal. But then I was hearing from other leaders that they were out for different reasons. And so I was like, you know what? Let's just cancel. It's not worth it.
When I told my son, I said, hey, it's off for tonight, or he told me, saw it on social media, and I said, are you upset? He's like, no. Like, I'm good. I'm tired. And I know leading up to it, I said to you, hey, if you need help, let me know. And I was thinking, please don't ask me to help you, because I knew I would feel like trash on Sunday. And, it's funny to contrast that. I had a weekend that was unusual in that, like, Saturday and Sunday, nothing on the schedule, like no baseball practices, no meetings, nothing. On Sunday, all I had was preaching twice, which is my favorite thing to do. And then there was no meetings before church, after church, in the afternoon. I was like, this is awesome. This was nice. Like, it was just like, and it just doesn't happen. And people were like, what do you got going on? It's like, nothing. Like, pick up McDonald's after church and watch football. Watch football on Saturday, football on Sunday. And was pretty happy about that. Actually,
nice.
Yeah, it was. And then even got to Saturday evening, and Sherry had bought this piece of furniture. It was a day bed to put together, and it had been sitting for about 3 weeks. And I went in there and started working on it with football on the screen at the same time. And she's like, wow. And I'm like, yeah. And then, when you have like 50 screws to put together with an Allen wrench, it gets annoying. And she's like, you're not even in a bad mood. I said, I know. Maybe it's because I didn't have other things on my plate.
Yeah, so, there you go.
So that's probably another conversation for another day, talking about.
We're going to.
I know.
We are going to be talking about rest and even Sabbath and days off and all those things coming soon. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I'll hold those thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to go ahead and jump in. I don't want to waste too much time here, except for one thing that's pretty important. I got to try this on Sunday night, but there's a new wing flavor at B-Dubs. Have you heard about this?
No.
So the new wing flavor at B-Dubs is spicy sweet chili Doritos. So if you don't know, there's a purple bag of Doritos, okay? And most people who try it, they're like, yeah, that's the best flavor, no doubt. It's the purple bag of Doritos, and B-Dubs turned it into a wing flavor, and I tried it on Sunday night, and it's amazing. Yeah. It tastes just like the Doritos.
I will have to try it.
And there's bits of Dorito in the wing sauce.
What? Yep. Really? Okay.
So we're not sponsored by B-Dubs, but
we're still looking for that sponsorship.
Please sponsor us.
Yes, Doritos maybe.
That would be awesome. Yep. But go try it because it's very, very good. So I don't know how long it'll be here. It says limited time, but it was good. Yeah. So pretty solid. Maybe we should get into that debate for a couple minutes. B-Dubs or Roosters?
I prefer Roosters. I think the wings, and I like boneless. I think they're just a little meatier. What do you think?
So I would say, in terms of meat, Roosters all day long.
Right.
Their chicken wings are just so much better. But sauces, I do think B-Dubs does a better job.
They have more options.
Yeah.
And
I think that B-Dub's sauce is a little bit different, whereas Rooster sauce is pretty basic.
Right.
So I think if you're going for a good sauce or something different, B-Dub's is the place to go.
There's some good deals sometimes at B-Dub's too, like on, I think Tuesday. I don't know. We're not going to advertise for them. But
right.
anyway.
But yeah. So that's a big debate, I know. And I would say there's pros and cons of both. If you would say, where are we going right now, Roosters or B-Dub's, I would say Roosters. I love Roosters. But
I would say too, just because it's closer and they're usually faster.
Yeah,
sometimes B-Dubs.
Roosters has it figured out. They are fast.
Yeah, they're good.
Anyway,
wow, this is not what this is about.
So let's go ahead and dive in. We had staff meeting on Monday.
Yes.
Here at Sycamore, we do staff meeting every other Monday, roughly. And usually there comes a time where we just give general ministry updates and things like that. Right. And our children's minister started talking about the problems that she's been having for the last couple months. It's been a while now, actually, of not being able to get enough volunteers.
Right.
And she talked about how her name is Amy, so shout out Amy. She's awesome. Yes. But she talked about how this past Sunday during second service, because of the lack of volunteers that she had, and she's had similar type of instances like this, but she ended up in a small group, leading a small group with 17 kids in it.
17 is not a small group.
It's not a small group. But it kind of opened up this conversation about, especially with COVID, how there's kind of been this move towards people not serving and just kind of this lack of interest in serving, lack of desire to serve. Right. And we haven't pushed it super hard, but it doesn't really matter what we say, how we advertise it, how we do it. People just are not flocking to serve right now. And so it started a really good conversation with our staff, and I thought it'd be interesting just to bring up some of the points that we made there, along with some scripture on serving and things like that. So that's where we're going today. Any initial thoughts on that?
Well, I think just to back up, I mean, we usually start off our staff meeting by sharing personal prayer requests, and then who in your ministry needs prayer. And then after we pray, and like you said, sharing ministry updates, it's almost like this last week became like a support group.
Yeah.
Because we all have feelings about everything that's happened in the last year and a half, and it's affected all of us differently. And, we as a church expanded our building and we opened more seats. And so now we have not twice as much, but almost twice as many seats, and there's still less people coming to church. And so we have those of us that are in the worship center on Sunday morning, we're loving being together, and we're excited that we're together, we're not online, all of that. But yet there's a lot of room for growth. But then on the other side, like you said, Amy's like, if you filled that place up, there's no way we could contain the kids, not because there's not room for them in the rooms. So I think about it, and I knew we might talk about this today. It's almost a mirror image of what's happening in the job world. Like everywhere you go, help wanted, right? Help wanted signs are everywhere. People, I mean, those are paid positions. Obviously, we're talking about volunteers, but it's almost like the same thing. People aren't willing to put themselves out there, whether it's for a job, whether it's for a ministry opportunity. But in the church, well, there's a lot of things we talked about, but there had been an issue in the last decade or so toward a consumer mentality, not just the last decade, but the idea of like, what does this church offer? What does it have for my kids? And we think that is so vital that we have good kids ministries and we have security in place, and ratios are important. And you were referring to elementary where it's a little more flexible, but there's ratios for babies and toddlers and preschool. And the thing that would just kill me to think about is having to put out a sign that says, sorry, we're full.
Yeah.
You can't drop your kid off.
Yeah.
But we're close to that.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that reality, right? If you are somebody who gets past the point of just coming to church every week and leaving, and you're like, man, okay, let's start to think about the reality of church and how things run and all that stuff, you realize so much of church is ran by volunteers.
Right.
And obviously, if we don't have enough volunteers, or any church, I'm not just talking about our church specifically, this is something that's happening everywhere.
Right.
And if you don't have enough volunteers to run a certain ministry, think about, just the reality of that. If a family comes to the first time or something and they're like, oh, do you guys have kids ministry? Yeah, just go over to the next gen building. They walk over there and all our volunteers or the people working the welcome desk are like, hey, we're so happy you're here this Sunday. Like, that's great. Thanks so much for visiting. But we don't have enough volunteers to have your kids in our beautiful building, our beautiful room. Sorry, but we just can't do that today. You have to take them in service with you. I just think about, like, you know, if we have to get to that point, I'm not saying we're there now, but let's talk about the reality of that. Like, to some degree, churches need volunteers,
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. This isn't new. In kids ministry, I think it's like, you know, I've been here 10 years, and for Amy, she's been here longer than me, but it's always been an issue of constant recruiting. You always have to be recruiting. You always have to be adding. You always have to, but it's not just, oh, can you come do it right now? We have a process. I mean, we have a background check. We can't just put anybody with our kids. We want to make sure that they want to be there, because you can't put somebody that doesn't want to be there with them. They're not going to handle it right, but they also have to be checked out, make sure that our kids are going to be safe. So there's just, you can't. And then with, I think before COVID, it was a problem, and this has just made it worse, because some people that were faithful just haven't come back. Some have come back to church and said, I'm not ready to be in there with kids yet. And then some people just haven't come back to church. And so that just creates all kinds of issues. And thinking about having to put up signs or having to return people away is just a thought that none of us want to talk about, but it could be reality. We're not that, I mean, you say we're not there, but we're not that far. I remember, and I brought this up in the staff meeting, I remember as a kid sitting in our church that we were going to, and it was a big church. I was maybe a teenager at the time, but I can remember sometimes they would get up before the first opening song, and they would say, hey, we don't have enough nursery workers right now, so we're going to take volunteers. Anybody here that can leave right now and walk out and go serve with our babies right now. And they kind of wait. We can't start the service until we make sure we have. And then, you know, 2 people would get up. My mom would say, all right, I'll do it.
Right.
You know, and this is a church, that was a church that was like, you know, 1,000 people. And I'm thinking, that is like cringy, but it's also one of the things that if you're a visitor, you're a first-time guest in a church, and you've just dropped your kid off, and then you hear them saying there's not enough people back there, like, you're like, I'm going to go get my kid.
What did I get into?
Yeah, so, I mean, that's not something you do anymore.
Right.
That's not something you want to see happen in your church, but there's that I guess that struggle,
tension,
the tension,
you know, that just between like how much do you push the fact that we literally need volunteers, we run on volunteers, but at the same time we don't want to come off like that cringy desperate, you know. Absolutely. I know
it's
and tricky,
and of course, you know, it's not about need, it's about opportunity. We want it to be like, this is not just do this because we need it, do it because you're impacting the next generation. That's what we, you know, like, I wish I could do it. I really do. I mean, I wish I could, like, but I can't. I have a job to do on Sunday morning that keeps me from being able to serve in the kids ministry. But it's an awesome opportunity for people.
So let's take a step back out of our specific situation here at Sycamore, which is, you know, right now it is kids ministry that's kind of lacking in those volunteers that are needed. But let's talk about, you know, the big C church, the American church. You know, I feel like to some degree people are struggling with this need for volunteers. And like you said, it's even happening outside of the church with different jobs, and you see help wanted everywhere in places that are changing their hours because they literally don't have enough staff. By the way, side note, don't harass, you know, part-time workers at restaurants because they don't have staff members. Okay, let's not go down that road. But like, why is this happening? Like, what about the pandemic and what about this last year and a half even has put us in this state where, if we're being honest, it feels like our world is in a state of help wanted. Our world has a help wanted sign up, you know, in every of every circle. So what has caused this?
We hit on this last week when we were talking about comparison. The idea of self-preservation. It's got to be, what can I do for me and my family to protect us, that makes us feel comfortable? And we all withdrew for a little bit. We had to last year. And then for some, it's just become, I don't want to be negative and have this podcast be about calling people out for selfishness.
Yeah, but to some degree.
I think that's the reality, though. Yeah. And people have become more and more selfish. It's more about what works best for me, what I'm willing to do. And I even said this past Sunday, one of the things that I talked about was the fact of kids and students and adults not having a depth and knowledge of God. And it's not that you're not and Amy's not and I'm not teaching the Word of God. It's that people only come to church 1.4 times a month, the average American Christian churchgoer. So then think about it. If you only go to church 1.5 times a month, what's the chances of you feeling obligated or wanting to serve in the church? So, and that's not just talking about Sycamore, that's talking about the church as a whole. So I think people go to church less, so they're obviously going to serve less, but they're going to want it to be all set for them when they get there.
Right.
And like you said, like in a church like ours, there's like 6 full-time staff members, and there's 500 to 800 people that call this their church.
Right.
Well, how does that work
if
you don't have volunteers? So
it doesn't.
It doesn't work. I mean, and don't want to paint a picture like it's not working. It's just fragile. It's like the church is fragile. I've not to divert here, but I mean, I know just recently of a church that just closed its doors. I mean, it was a church plant from a couple years ago, and it was just too hard after the pandemic, and there's a lot of churches that are on that edge of that, because it's just become too difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the statistics exactly, but I know that a lot of churches have closed in this last year and a half, church plants and small churches, just because of not being able to keep their doors open, not having even the finances, but bigger than that, the volunteers and the ability to run it. I know that there's been a lot of churches that have either had to combine with other churches or just close their doors and say, sorry, we literally can't do this anymore. So I think you hit on it, where I want to go today with this idea of self-preservation, and dare I say this idea of self-entitlement. I think that even bigger than serving, I think that we have this inner dilemma in the American church where we are so concerned with what's best for us and what we want. And is there a healthy line? Is there a healthy way to look out for yourself and your family? Is that biblical? Is that right? Or should we just constantly be only looking out for the good of other people? What do you think?
Well, I think there's a balance, of course, but I think that Christ called us to serve others. And I mean, the Bible calls us out constantly on not being self-centered. Right. One of the things I read even this week is that's happened during the pandemic is the people went online with their church, but then they started church hopping online. And they're not committed to any church. They just, whatever series they like, so anyway, I do think, though, this idea of serving others, I got an email from the local food bank saying they don't have enough people to just stock their shelf. They need people to run to Meijer and Kroger and pick up food that is being given to them because they don't have people to run and get this stuff and put it on their food bank for people that need it. It's like it's everywhere. This is volunteerism at its lowest, I think, in our culture right now. And it goes back to, I want to take care of my family. And that's, of course, my motivation. First thing I thought of when the pandemic happened, like we talked about in previous episodes about 9/11, it's like you want to take care of your family first. But okay, our family's okay. Let's stop. Let's look in the mirror and say, okay, is this the way I want to live the rest of my life? Because I think all of us kind of wonder in our world too, especially the church world, what is this going to look like in 5 years? Are we going to get back to what was normal? I mean, it was already, I think getting more difficult to convince people to sacrifice their time. But now I think it's amplified. And so we don't know. And I know it's different and every church isn't the same, but I think our church is kind of generally a picture of what is happening in a broader sense. I mean, I think like we've kind of started already, I think everybody's feeling it, And here's the deal. Like, as we start this kind of conversation about serving others and this idea of even servant leadership and wherever we want to go with this, this is bigger than the church too. Even though the church does need volunteers desperately across the globe, people need volunteers. Outside of the church, though, there's still this idea of taking that servant heart into everything that you do. And I think we're even lacking that. It's not just we're lacking people who serve in kids ministry. I think we're lacking Christ followers who serve others in their day-to-day lives. I think in our jobs, in our schools, in our wherever we are, I think we're lacking that initiative because of self-preservation, because of self-entitlement. We kind of have this mindset of, well, if it's not the greater good of me and my family or my comfort zone or whatever, then I don't really need to serve, and I think it's so much bigger than even the walls of the church. I think if people saw 99% of us in our day-to-day lives, would they say, man, that person is so generous and so loving and so kind and just always looking to serve others? I don't know. I don't know if we can say that about ourselves, And so this conversation clearly has to be addressed at some level, because I don't know if we're handling the true message and call of God in our lives really well. I don't know if we are. That's a good question. I mean, and when you say that, I'm trying to think, what examples are you talking about? Are you talking about seeing a neighbor unloading something from their truck. They're doing a project, and you say, "Hey, do you need a hand?" Or you're just saying, are we talking about food bank? Are we talking about?
I mean, I think a little bit of everything, but I think your example of the neighbor is great. I think you know, on a message one time, you could be talking about missions, or we could have a outreach of the month about missions, and everybody's heart is going, yes, like I want to be involved in that. I wonder if I can go with the students on their next mission trip, blah, 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 blah. But when's the last time you crossed the street and told that person about Jesus, or told them, you know, is there anything I can do for you, or help them move a couch or whatever? Like, I think that we get so pumped about certain aspects of serving and about, you know, doing things, and I can volunteer, you know, one Saturday of the month or whatever it is, but when's the last time that we just in every single day look for opportunities to serve?
I think there's a word that we use, and we only use it in the term of money, and it's the word generosity. I think our church is a very generous church, and I think people have become even more generous. At first, I think people were worried about money with the pandemic, but then, you know, the government started handing out money, and most people in our area didn't lose their jobs, and some people have gotten increases, and they've saved money because they're not commuting as much. Anyway, money isn't the issue. So when we say generous, oh yeah, people are generous with the money, but being generous with your time.
Yeah, with your effort.
With your effort. And like, you know, sometimes it's just on a small scale, we've seen it here. Like there'll be a day where you're having a big youth thing, and you've got carloads of stuff to carry in. And if you say something, we all jump up and we help you.
Right.
And we like pitching in. If Christy has a big event, we pitch in. We set up tables for others in their ministry. We're like, I think we try to not be selfish with each other here.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
But that's in our job, and it's not required, but it makes the atmosphere much better when we know that we can count on each other in that way. But are we doing that out there in the world? And do we just go the extra mile for people? I don't know.
Yeah. It's tricky.
It's tricky. It is. I know. It's like, it's easy to just think, well, I don't really want to do that.
Right.
But
I think getting to the heart of this idea of kind of having that servant mindset all the time is then going to boil into more people taking the initiative to serve in church and serve in those different areas too. I think it goes hand in hand.
Right.
You know, like you said at the beginning of this idea of volunteering even in church, we don't want it to be forced on you, right? We don't want to say like, just go and serve because, well, we tell you to and we need it. No, like if you are a Christ follower and you are trying every single day to have your heart aligned with Jesus, then you should want to go serve. It is part of what we're commanded to do. And when you're, not that any one of us is perfect, but when you're taking steps every day to be more like him, it kind of comes naturally to want to look out for other people and therefore serve them, right? I think the sign of somebody who is serious about their relationship with Jesus is somebody who serves other people. I really do. And I think this year at camp, you were there because we needed some volunteers at camp. And one night the speaker put it so simply in a way that I've never really heard it before, but he was talking about how, you know, obviously the first step is to give your life to Jesus and step into a relationship with him. But the next step is serving. Like he kind of put it, really laid it out very simply of like, if you truly have a relationship with Jesus, the next step for you is to serve somewhere, you know, and he put it in the context of your local church, but I would say it's anywhere, right? If you are truly bought into this gospel message, what Jesus did for you on the cross, then kind of one of the only natural responses you have is, okay, how can I use, you know, this amazing gifts that Jesus has given me, what he's called me to do, his love for me, how can I spread that to other people? You know, I think it's just this natural progression, and I think we've lost that.
I agree. I think the guilt concept is just not the way to go. I think guilting people into serving is not the answer.
Or anything, really.
Getting them into anything. I mean, but some guilt can be good for us if guilt leads us to do things that we should be doing. There's times when we have conviction, guilt, however you want to call it. But I don't think that is the motivation that works the best with people. But I think you and I know there's people in our lives that we can call on for anything, and they're always like, yeah, what do you need?
Oh, absolutely.
Isn't that awesome? And wouldn't it be awesome if people thought of you and me that way? I mean, and we can't do everything for everybody.
Yeah.
Of course. But just to be a person that is ready and willing to say, well, yeah, what do you need? I'll do that for you. It's just in little ways. And I think we're all probably good at serving our own family. And maybe not perfect, but we're, you know, that's like, oh yeah, I did that for my wife, or I did that for my husband or my kids and my parents. But beyond that, you know, that's where I think our culture, and somebody that is like that is a servant-hearted person in the church, in the community, they stand out. It's like, wow. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I think is really challenging about this, like when we bring up the conversation of telling others about our faith, right? Which evangelism, if you want to use the fancy church word for it. Some people get really overwhelmed by that because they're like, well, I don't have enough Bible knowledge. I don't have the words to say. But what if all it took was the way that you lived your life, being generous, being, servant-hearted, for people to say, okay, Steve, we've been living next to each other because I'm your neighbor in this hypothetical scenario for a couple years now. And just the way that I see you talking to other people, the way that I see you talking to me even, I want to know more about your life. Like, what makes you so generous, Steve? And then that's your window, your open door to say, well, let me tell you about Jesus. Like, I just think it's like, our actions attract people so much more than even our words really ever will. And so we need to be dedicated to this idea of being generous and kind all the time, even on social media, even when we're not face to face with somebody, being kind, being generous, being consistent with the message and love of Jesus to where other people say, okay, something's different about you and I want to know what that is. And I think we've just kind of taken this for granted. And a lot of us, we hear this message, this idea of spreading our faith, sharing our faith, serving, whatever you want to call it, and we just overcomplicate it. And we're like, okay, well, I can't do that. I'm not good enough. I don't have the words to say. I don't have the skills. I don't have the abilities. So that's for somebody else. Well, no. Lead with your life everywhere that you are and love others. And then I really think that's the first step in what Jesus could do through you.
Absolutely. Like it was a few weeks ago in a podcast we were talking about being contagious in your influence. And I mentioned that there was a study I did years ago about contagious Christianity, is Bill Hybels' series. But one of the 6 forms of evangelism was servant evangelism. And the idea is just what you said. You said it well. It's just serving others and people notice there's something different about you, opens the door for you to share your faith.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's, in our motivation for being a servant-hearted person is because it honors God, not just because I want to be a good person. It's not just about being a good person everybody compliments and thinks is nice. It's about pointing people to Jesus with our lives. And so, I mean, on a macro scale, the whole world. On a micro scale, the church. I mean, there's just so many areas that and it's really about who's going to be the most important person. I remember that I just thought of this, cross sticks. I remember when it's a simple one, the word joy. I remember you've probably seen it too. Joy, Jesus, others, and then you. And if you keep it in that order, then you have more joy in your life. And I think that's one of the, not that it's a sales pitch for serving, but I always feel better when I do something for somebody else. And it just, when it brings joy to them and they're like thankful and you can see that they appreciated it, it's like, wow, okay. I feel better about myself more than if I sat home and selfishly watched, 3 more episodes of something on Netflix that I'm watching. Like, oh, that's fun. Yeah. And that's self-centered. But if I serve somebody, I feel better about myself.
Yeah. I don't know the last time that I've willingly served somebody and been like, man, that was the worst.
Yes,
like, I hate this feeling,
You
it doesn't come like that. Matthew 20:26, he says, but among you will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be the first among you must become your slave. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. He's talking to the disciples here, which are, dedicated followers of him. And I just love that this was the direction he went with a statement like this, because he could have said, for the Son of Man came to teach and show everybody the right words to say and the perfect way to live and all those things. But he says, no, the Son of Man even came to be, to serve, not to be served. And we should try to live that way in everything that we do. It's just challenging. It's a really, really hard conversation to have. And I just think the conversation that we had on Monday really sparked the feelings for all of us here on staff of just realizing how big this issue really is, of just like, man, what would it look like if we truly lived like Jesus calls us to, denied ourselves, and lived for him and therefore living for other people.
Right. The disciples needed to hear that. They were all trying to figure it out, jockeying for position.
Yeah, all the time.
And Jesus, I think one of the great things that he did was move slowly through the crowds. He was never in a hurry. And we get in a hurry for the next thing that isn't that maybe always that important. And when we slow down and our eyes open up and we can see opportunities to serve, and I just think that's so good. I mean, Jesus came to serve, not to be served. And he set the example in so many ways. I mean, there's just so time after time. And I think one of the most outstanding things he did was when he washed the feet of the disciples. Yeah. I mean, the ultimate servant. They were like, no, you shouldn't be doing that. No, why are you doing that to us? Like, come on, get the picture here. Yeah. Like, I think that's just something always to be in our minds.
And I think it's a really elementary principle, but I mean, think about all the ways that Jesus could have come. And I think about all the ways that his ministry could have looked, right? He could have made himself, oh my gosh, the richest of the rich, and he could have had the megachurch at the time, and he could have done all of the things to get everybody watching. It was Jesus. Of course he could do that if he wanted to. Right. But instead, like you said, he spent so much time walking from place to place, spending intentional time with people, right? Like teaching them to serve, showing them how to serve, not just saying, hey, go serve, but doing it. I just think it's so challenging for us because that example is so different than what we see today. You know, like if Jesus, the Son of God, the perfect Lamb of God, spent 33 years on this earth serving other people, and we can't spend an hour on a Sunday serving somebody else. That's a little bit challenging.
It is. And, you know, when you bring it back to the church again, it's like serving in the church on a Sunday. I mean, sometimes people say, you know, you have a bigger auditorium and it's coming back from COVID. Why don't you just do one service? Because you could cram everybody in there. It'd be like awesome. Like, one of the main reasons you do too is so that people have space, but also so that people can serve 1 hour in kids ministry and then worship the other hour.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You don't have to miss church or miss the service in order to serve.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just options. You know, that is, you know, sometimes it just seems like a big ask for a lot of people, and it's really, you know, an hour of your time.
Right.
We talked about too. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We talked about it too in the meeting about how, like, when I was growing up in past days here, even at Sycamore in the early days, my parents, they taught like kindergarten, Sunday school for years, and they were given a curriculum, but they had to do all this prep during the week. Is that what you were going to say too? And like now, the way Amy does, and I think you do for your leaders too, do all this prep for you, print everything out, get all the crafts you need ready. Yeah. It is walk in, plug and play. I mean, you should read the material in advance and be ready, but it is not hard like it maybe used to be, and we don't ask a lot. Just come in and walk in and do it. Right.
Yeah. I mean, Amy does a fantastic job of like spending the work and the time preparing every Sunday so that leaders show up and she's just, you know, ready to come alongside them and give them the tools to do it, you know? And I think maybe that's a reason why some people are deterred from serving in general, is just that goes back to that fear of not being good enough, not, you know, being perfect, all of those things. And we're not asking for that. No. But, you know, I think that, you know, there's just so much misconception we have about this concept of serving, you know, like it, and if we're being honest, it really is a command of Jesus for us. It's not an option, right? He didn't say, if you're good enough, if you're qualified enough, if you have X, Y, and Z abilities, then if you're Enneagram, whatever. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. But it's a command, right? He looked at the disciples, he looked at his followers, and he said, hey, you know, you are going to serve because I came to serve. And it's just, I think we miss out on that. And maybe we can hear that. I think we talk about serving a lot, and we can hear that and be like, oh yeah, that's nice, but we don't actually do it, right? And it is a command. It is, dare I say, a requirement of following Jesus.
And maybe even for us too, it would be even give us more credibility if we had another couple people sitting here with us that aren't paid staff members, because people could look at us and say, well, you guys need us, so that's why you're saying this. But like, it's not about us, it's about ministry. It's about reaching people. And why do we want more people in our church? Because of numbers? No, because each person needs to hear about Christ and grow in their faith, and the kids do. Right. And so we build a next gen building, and we have this room for them. And so all of that, it's just, it burns in our hearts that we want to reach more people. And we really, we live on the backs of our volunteers. We grow on that. And we had a volunteer appreciation night back, I think it was in August, had like 100 volunteers. So we don't want to paint a picture like we don't have great volunteers. We have awesome volunteers.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's like we just need more. Right.
Yeah. Okay, let's go here and like before you got into ministry, before you worked at a church, before you did anything like that, what's the first memory that you have of serving that you can think of?
Yeah. I remember when I was in the church I grew up in, from age 10 on, where I had gotten saved and baptized and got involved in youth group. I remember they had a very big kids church program that happened at the same time as big church, you know, for adults. And I remember as a high schooler being asked to go in there and sit in there with those kids and help manage that group. And whenever there was like a breakout into certain things, work with those kids. And I didn't really have training on that. I just was one of the good church kids. And so I remember that, that's the first memory in my mind of serving in the church. And it wasn't long, you know, it's like once you feel called to the ministry, I know in the summers I started working at a Christian camp, but I was paid very small. It's almost like serving because the pay was so low, but it was a ministry. So that's my first memory. How about
you? I remember being like 5th, 6th grade helping with Amy and Kids Live, which was it's 1st through 4th grade, kindergarten through 1st.
It's kindergarten through 4th.
4th, yeah. So I remember doing that in the old Kids Live room, which is where we used to have it. I remember kind of helping in the sound booth and doing some different things like that. So that's the first like real memory I have of it.
Right.
And then as I got into high school, I used to help out with our 5th and 6th grade class. So that was the first time I got to like teach and try different things. And really looking back, that's like kind of sparked my bigger desire and interest to serve God with my life. You know, you just never know, like if you put yourself out there, you never know what God's going to do with it. Right. You know, because I know we say this so much, but God's not looking for perfection. He's looking for obedience. He's looking for somebody who's faithful and just says, okay, sure, you know.
Remember the old cliche, the ability that God is looking for is availability.
There it is.
And so it's true though. Yeah, it's like nobody is disqualified. You know, you don't have to have all these talents that you think you need. That's the thing, because very few people, you know, have that skill set to maybe like Amy's skill set with kids. She's awesome. I mean, and we don't need everybody to have that. Right.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Another verse that I have, you might know it because it's very, very famous. John 3:30. You know what it is off the top of your head? He must become greater and greater, and I must become less and less. Right.
That's good.
This is, as we start to land this episode here, I kind of want to stamp that on here, and it goes back to the point of like that should be your heart. You know, if you're a true Christ follower and you truly understand what Jesus did for you, that should be your heart, right? He must become greater and greater, and I must become less and less. In your home, in your job, in your school, in your church, he must become greater and greater, and I must become less and less. You know, and sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow, because that means giving up some of the things that, you know, make you feel good and make you feel comforted and make you feel like sometimes it is giving up some of those things, sacrificing those things so that you can serve, so that you can give to other people, so that you can love him better. I mean, sometimes, you know, truly following Jesus it does require sacrifice, right?
Absolutely. I think there's another aspect to that. When I hear that verse, what you said is perfect, but I also think it's about not getting credit. Like when you step into the role of being a servant, it's like, you might not get credit. You might not make it on the big screen. You may never get a shout out on, you know, anywhere. Yeah. Are you willing to do that and help somebody and serve in a ministry where it's just behind the scenes? And like, I believe the heroes, there's so many, and I don't want to say one ministry volunteers are more important than others, but there's a lot of the behind the scenes people. Oh yeah. Kids ministry is huge for behind the scenes, but there are others that, you know, the people like in the production team at church, you see the people on the stage leading, and we get to be on stage, the band is on stage, but the people that, you know, make everything work. Yeah. I mean, there's so many areas of, you know, of the ministries, and not just ministry, serving out there and, you know, doing things for your neighbor, doing things in community. You may never get credit for it, but it's not that. It's about Jesus, right? Yeah. That's what he must become more and more. We must become less and less.
And kind of following on this path of maybe making some people angry in this episode.
Yes.
If you are somebody who is motivated by being seen and being recognized and all of those things, then maybe it's time to take a step back and get a heart check, because that's not the point of why we serve. Everything that we do should be to bring God glory, right? We're called to serve not so that we look better, it's to make him look better and make his name look better. And so, you know, if you're somebody right now who says, well, I do serve, right? Like this conversation doesn't really apply to me because I serve in guest services or whatever. Well, if your motivation is anything other than to bring God glory, then okay, maybe you should take a heart check, right? Maybe it's time for you to hear this verse that he must become greater and greater and you must become less and less, and say, wait, that means my pride and my ego needs to become less and less so that I can glorify him more. And yet again, that's a hard pill to swallow. That's not easy. But I think it's a necessity for sure.
It is. This is a good conversation.
Yeah, I like this a lot. Yeah. So here we go. We're going to end it. Steve, do you have anything you want to share to somebody who maybe has never served before? In the church, out of the church, maybe they just never really have taken their faith into action. Do you have anything you want to share with somebody maybe listening who feels that way right now? An encouragement, anything you got for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've hit on a good bit today, but I think anything like that can feel like a big risk. And we all we'll take calculated risks in our lives, right? Some people listening may be like extreme risk takers. If that's you, you probably already have been serving in some way. But the people that are the more calculated people always want to figure out in advance, well, what's it going to cost me? How committed am I going to have to be? What if I don't like it and then I can't get out of it?
And then it's awkward when I say no.
There's so many reasons people talk themselves out of something that they know they should do. And so that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say, look, no matter what it is, kids ministry is not for everybody. There's people that are called to it. But what I'm saying is whatever it is, if you will give it a try, and I can promise this at Sycamore Creek, and you try it for a month, whatever, it doesn't work out for you. You've been equipped, you try to get answers and it just doesn't fulfill you. There's another ministry you can try. And you can do something else.
And that ministry leader will not shun you, okay?
There's people that in the church that used to work with students that you see, you don't like turn your head, you pass them in the hall. They're still your friends. It's like, it's not like that at all. People get that mentality there. So the fear is there, but like, just give it a try and don't worry, because God shaped you to serve. Like if you read the New Testament, like we are not just supposed to fill a seat. Now, if you're new, first-time guest, that we want to be ready for them. But if you call Sycamore your home, like God has a place for you. We teach this in our Discover class, and it's biblical that He's gifted us all in different ways. We're part of a body. We didn't get into that today, but if the hands cut off, then there's that whole scripture that Paul talks about. If the hand's not functioning right, then the whole body can still be going, but the hand is a big part of it, and we're all different parts of the body. So if somebody's not doing their part, there's going to be dysfunction. And so, man, you get an opportunity to fulfill that mission that God gave you, your purpose to serve. And so if you're not serving, you're not fulfilling the purpose God has for you. So,
and you get to explore it. I think that's one of my favorite things about God is, like you said, whoever's listening, everybody has been given a unique set of gifts and abilities, and we have a God that we get to explore that with, right?
So
that's so cool.
Like we will talk to you about it, like me and you, Christy, and others, Amy, Jared, everybody that leads a ministry here. Like we're not going to try to pigeonhole you and say, this is what you have to do. And we may talk to you, and you may talk to somebody and you're like, they won't fit kids ministry or students, but I think it would be great for Jared's ministry or guest services. And we work together. It's a team. It's about the big picture. It's not about building some kingdom within the church. So it's like, once you get into it and you realize that, you get over that hump of fear and concern about what am I committing to. There's no contract here, right? Yeah. So you'll feel better. You'll know that you're doing something to help further the kingdom of God, and that's really what matters in the end. Not our kingdom, His kingdom.
Right, and just know, yet again, we're called to walk by faith and not by sight. And so if you're living your life constantly calculating the risks and trying to see tomorrow and what it's going to look like, just know that you are in direct violation of what Jesus has called us to do. And so it's time to get over that calculated risk fear and just say, okay, God, you're in charge, not me.
Take it outside the church. If I help my neighbor do something and he looks like he's struggling, what if he wants to be my best friend now and I don't want to be his best friend? What if I help with the food pantry deliveries and then they're like, I'm on the hook and I can only do it this week? We don't do stuff because we're thinking, I'm going to be super committed to this now and it's going to be terrible. You don't know that. Stop. Just stop. Right?
Last thing I want to share, 1 Peter 4:10. God has given each of you a gift from His great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another. Do you have the gift of speaking? Then speak as though God Himself were speaking through you. Do you have the gift of helping others? Do it with all the strength and energy that God supplies. Then everything you do will bring glory to God through Jesus Christ. All glory and power to Him forever and ever. Amen. I mean, there's no other place to end than perfect. Right there.
Yeah, I get it.
And so there you go. Right? Get out there and serve. Step outside of your comfort zone and listen to the calling that God has on your life with your unique set of skills, abilities, and even your unique circle of influence, right? Going back to that. Use it and serve Him. And I promise you, the messages that you give on Sunday morning, they're going to be more relevant. Like things are going to become more beautiful because you are actually taking the messages of Jesus and putting them into your day-to-day life.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you all for listening. I really thank you, Mitch, for this conversation. I think it was perfect.
Yeah, this has been great. We're kind of pumping through this season. It's been fun so far, but stay tuned over the next couple weeks. We have some interesting things coming up and some guests. Yes. Some guests. That's in all things first. So
I'm excited about both what we got planned. So
it's going to be awesome. Great. So we will see you guys next week and have a fantastic week.
Yep. Have a great week.
thank you so much for listening to this episode of the In All Things podcast. Our challenge for you today is to send this episode to one person. Seriously, think of somebody right now that could use this conversation and send it to them. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic ideas, please send them to podcast@sycamorecreek.org, and make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Sycamore Creek Church so that you can always see what's going on in our world. If this conversation helped you at all, make sure you share it, leave a review, and subscribe so that you don't miss out on a single episode. We love you, God loves you, and we'll see you next week on the In All Things podcast.